of the dense regular fibrous connective tissue. ठीक है? It's a narrow band of the dense regular fibrous connective tissue in the pelvic region of the body. ठीक है? Right? So you can define it. The inguinal ligament is also called as the Papart's ligament, and it is defined as the narrow band of the dense regular fibrous connective tissue in the pelvic region. Okay. Now, how it is formed? Basically, it is formed by the lower border of the external oblique epineus. मैंने आपको बताया था ना, the lower border of the external oblique epineus, it is thickened and folded backwards on itself, right? And it is going to form the inguinal ligament, which extends between the anterior sphenic spine up to the pubic tubercle. Is it clear? Right? It's just a repetition. I told you before. So its location, it is just located where? Just below the, beneath the fold of groin, right? Its location, it is just located beneath the fold of the groin. This is your groin. So it is located beneath the fold of the groin, and you see it runs obliquely downwards, okay? Obliquely from the anterior sphenic spine up to the pubic tubercle. So if you have a look over its shape, so its shape, it is its lateral half, it is rounded and oblique, you can see, right? Its lateral half is rounded because I told you that the external oblique is rolled on itself. It's just a its lateral half is rounded, and the medial half, your upper surface, that is grooved. So upper half is, you see, rounded, right? And this, medial half, it is a bit horizontal, right? It's a bit horizontal, and it is grooved. And why it is grooved? Because it is going to form the floor of the inguinal canal. जहाँ से ये आपकी spermatic cord, you see, this spermatic cord is going to run over here. It is going to lie in this grooved upper part of the inguinal ligament, right? So if you go for the shape of this one, so the shape is the lateral part it is rounded because of the folded backwards on itself of the epinosis of the external oblique muscle, and its medial part, it is having a grooved upper surface, and this groove is for what? It is going to lodge this spermatic cord. The spermatic cord lies over it. It's just lying on the upper surface of this inguinal ligament. Is it clear, ji? Now, iski attachments kya hai, ji? Here you can see iska jo lower border hai, which is the rounded one, right? It is going to give attachment to the fasciolata of the thigh. If fasciolata or the deep fascia of the thigh, it is attached to its lower margin. Okay, iske lower margin pe you can see this. Okay, problem to nahi bache. Okay, the lower margin of inguinal ligament, it is going to give attachment to the fasciolata of the thigh. And you see, due to the pull of this fasciolata of the thigh, the traction of this fascia makes the inguinal ligament, which is curved downwards, convex downwards. ठीक है, आप देखें ना, इसमें थोड़ी सी convexity है नीचे की तरफ, right? I told you, it's just like this. So इसकी convexity क्यों है? Because due to the pull of or the traction of this fascia, which is attached at its lower border, right? Now, this upper surface, you see, it is going to give attachment to the muscles, certain muscles. कौन से muscle को attachment देगा जी? कौन बताएगा जी? The lateral 2/3 of the, internal oblique, बच्चे ये तो खुद external oblique से तो ये खुद बना हुआ है, right? So it is giving to attachment to the upper 2/3, lateral 2/3 of the inguinal ligament give origin to the internal oblique muscle, and the lateral 1/3 is going to give attachment to the transversus abdominis muscle, right? Or over here you can see in the middle part, internal oblique से जो muscle fibers आते हैं, these are the cremasteric muscle. ठीक है, याद है किसी को? The cremasteric muscle comes from where? Good. Okay, now we'll talk about its relations. The relations में upper part that I told you that is going to give attachment to the muscles, whereas in the lower half, lower part, right? I told you the upper grooved surface of the inguinal ligament of the medial part, it is going to form the floor of the inguinal canal. Inguinal canal, beta, you can see this is a small passage. ये आप देख रहे हैं from here. Just let me show you. It's a small passage जिसमें ये आपकी ये spermatic cord अंदर. Okay, just show you somewhere else. You can see this small passage. ठीक है, ये आपको small passage, the medial aspect of these inguinal ligaments, you can see this small passage जहाँ पे ये आपकी spermatic cord in the cases of males, spermatic cord in the cases of female जो है round ligament of the uterus, right? वो यहाँ से pass करता है, right? So it is going to form the this inguinal canal का जो floor है, that is basically formed by this upper surface of the medial part of the inguinal ligament. Is it clear जी? Right? और यहाँ पे कौन सा structure पड़ा हुआ जी? In case we have got the spermatic cord, and in the cases of female we have got the round ligament of the uterus. Now, what would be the extensions of the inguinal ligament? ठीक है, inguinal ligament की extensions क्या क्या हैं जी? वैसे हम कुछ पढ़ चुके हैं, इसके बारे में डिस्कस एक दफा कर चुके हैं. कौन बताएगा जी? किसी को कुछ याद है जी? कुछ फाइबर्स हमने पढ़े थे which are extending backwards and upwards from the inguinal ligaments. जी, anybody?
Sir, lacunar ligament.
Okay. So we have got here, you can see we have this one, the inguinal ligament over here, and I told you that from the medial end of the inguinal ligament there are certain fibers that extends upwards and backwards, right? And these are going to be attached along the pectineal line or the pectin pubis, right? And that is called as the lacunar ligament. ठीक है जी? It is also called the pectineal part of the inguinal ligament or the lacunar ligament, right? और lacunar ligament के लिए एक और नाम हमने पढ़ा था जी, क्या पढ़ा था जी? किसी को याद है जी? Gibbernet's ligament, right? It is also called as the Gibbernet's ligament, right? So anteriorly, it is attached to the medial end of the inguinal ligament. Inguinal ligament के medial end पे ये attached है. Then these fibers will run upwards and backwards, and they are going to attach posteriorly over the pectineal line or the pectin pubis. Here you can see the attachment of the ligament. Here you can see it is triangular in shape. This lacunar ligament, it is triangular in shape while lying horizontally. Its apex is attached to the pubic tubercle. See, the triangular है, and its apex is attached to the pubic tubercle, and its base is going to form the free border, and this free border is going to form the medial boundary of the canal. कौन सी canal थी ये? क्या चीज reflect होगी यहाँ से? Femoral sheath, right? तो ये femoral canal की ये medial boundary बना है. ठीक है जी? Is it clear जी? Femoral ring. ठीक है? Femoral ring की ये medial boundary बना रहे हैं femoral canal. Is it clear जी? कोई problem तो नहीं है बच्चे? ठीक है? I'm talking about the extensions of the inguinal ligament. So lacunar ligament is what? It is basically what? It's an extension of the inguinal ligament, which extends from the medial end of inguinal ligament. Its fibers runs upwards and backwards, and they're going to be attached to the pectin pubis. It's triangular in shape, and its apex is attached to the pubic tubercle, and its base is going to form the concave free border, which is going to form the medial boundary of the femoral ring or the femoral canal. Problem तो नहीं है बच्चे? इसके बाद हमने एक और लिगामेंट पढ़ा था. क्या पढ़ा था जिसके साथ? The pectineal ligament of Cooper's, right? It is what? It is the extension of the posterior part of the base of the lacunar ligament. ये lacunar ligament की ये base है ना बच्चे, तो इसकी जो posterior part की ये जो extension है, ये इसका anterior part है, इसका posterior part है. So extension of the posterior part of the base of the lacunar ligament, right? It is, representing basically the thickening of the periosteum of the pectin pubis. ठीक है, यार जो pectineal surface है ना जी इसकी, pectineal fascia, which is just going to line the pectineal surface of the pubic bone, right? इसका जो fascia, it is basically the represented as the thickening of the pectineal fascia in this region, ठीक है, which is representing the extension from the posterior part of the base of this lacunar ligament. कोई प्रॉब्लम है तो बेटा पूछ लें. The pectineal ligament or the ligament of Cooper's, this one, the posterior extension of the base of the lacunar ligament. Is it clear, ji? Okay. Another one is the reflected part of the inguinal ligament.
सर लेक्यूनर लिगामेंट का दूसरा नाम क्या बताया था आपने?
Gimbernet's ligament. There you go. और इसका पेक्टिनियल लिगामेंट का दूसरा नाम क्या है जी? लिगामेंट ऑफ कूपर्स, राइट? ओके, तो कितनी एक्सटेंशंस हमने पढ़ ली जी? वी हैव गॉट द टू एक्सटेंशंस बिटवीन इंगुइनल लिगामेंट, lacunar ligament and the pectineal ligament, right? Okay, there is another extension of the inguinal ligament, right? And this is called the reflected part of the inguinal ligament. ये जो pubic tubercle पे जाके अटैच हो रहा है ना यहाँ पे, तो इसके कुछ फाइबर्स है. These fibers they runs upwards and medially, ठीक है? ये inguinal ligament के medial part से कुछ fibers they will travel upwards and medially, and that is called as the reflected part of the inguinal ligament, ठीक है जी? और ये कहाँ से जा रहे हैं? These fibers are basically coming from the lateral crust of the superficial inguinal ring, ठीक है जी? Now superficial inguinal ring, but I have just told you before that is basically a triangular opening here. You can see this is the triangular opening in the external oblique aponeurosis. पढ़ा था ना हमने superficial inguinal ring, मैंने आपको बताया. So that is the triangular opening basically present in the wall of the in the lower part of the external oblique aponeurosis here, ठीक है जी? Here you can see इसका ये एक lower border है और the lateral border है, or it is also called as the lateral crust of the superficial inguinal ring, और ये इसका above, this is a upper or the medial crust of the superficial inguinal ring, ठीक है? ये superficial inguinal ring का बेटा you can see this is a lateral crust and this is a medial or the superior crust, ठीक है जी? This one, और ये दोनों crust they are joined with each other in the middle by this fibers. These are called as the intercrural fibers, ठीक है? ये दो क्रूरस हैं, दो बॉर्डर्स हैं, और ये दोनों बॉर्डर्स को आपस में जो फाइबर्स मिला रहे हैं these are called the intercrural fibers, right? So ये जो lateral crust है जी, ये वाला, this one, यहाँ से the fibers will be going upwards and medially. जो कि यहाँ पे आपको यहाँ पे तो ये शीथ है ना, जब शीथ रिमूव करके ये जस्ट शो यू कि ये lateral crust ही है. Lateral crust fibers they are running upwards and medially, right? So these fibers, these are going to form these are called the reflected part of the inguinal ligament, and they are just passing in front of the conjoint tendon. What is the conjoint tendon, G? What is the conjoint tendon? Who will tell me? बेटे मैंने ऐसे कहा था पढ़ के आइएगा, नहीं पढ़ के आएंगे तो कोई फायदा नहीं है. What is the conjoint tendon?
oblique fibers, और जो आपके पास वो होते हैं ट्रांसफर लम्बिनस फाइबर के जो जॉइन करते हैं नीचे.
Afra, Miss Afra Ramzan.
Yes,
What is conjoint tendon?
sir.
Faria. Faria. Miss Faria. Do you have mic? Chat में reply करो बच्चे. What is the conjoint tendon, जी? कौन बताएगा? Any participant?
इंटरनल ऑब्लिक फाइबर जो आपके पास इंसर्ट होते हैं लोअर फाइबर्स वो आपके पास ज्वाइन करते हैं फाइबर्स ऑफ द ट्रांसवर्सस एब्डोमिनस उनको हम कंजॉइंट टेंडन्स कहते हैं.
So the lower fibers of the internal oblique join with the lower curved fibers of the transversus abdominis muscle. They are going to form the conjoint tendon. It's another name is fox inguinale, right? So here you can see.
कॉमन एपोन्यूरोसिस बना के ना वो इंसर्ट हो जाता है पेक्टिनल लाइन पे उसके क्रस्ट पे.
Yes, here you can see this one. The reflected inguinal ligament, it is going to be, they are going above. Okay, they are crossing this conjoint tendon, right? So its relation क्या that this reflected part of the inguinal ligament, it is just passing in front of the conjoint tendon, right? They're coming from the deep to the just behind the superficial inguinal ring from the lateral crus. ये lateral crus है जी, ये superficial inguinal ring, right? So it passes, it comes from the behind the superficial inguinal ring from the lateral crus of the ring, and then they will pass upwards and medially, passing in front of the conjoint tendon, and then they are going to be attached to the opposite fibers. Okay, they are going to meet with the opposite fibers. Okay, in front of the at the linea alba. Okay, in front of the linea alba, right? So fibers यहाँ से आने के बाद they're just crossing from here, और ये opposite side से जो fibers आ रही हैं they are just going to meet in the midline. ठीक है जी, in the linea alba. Is it clear जी? So the reflected part of the inguinal ligament, I told you these are the fibers which are coming from the lateral crus of the superficial inguinal ring, runs upwards and medially, and then they are going to join the fibers coming from the opposite side in the midline at the linea alba. Is it clear जी? कोई problem तो नहीं है? So this is a question, viva question, कि what are the extensions of the inguinal ligament? उस वक्त आप जो है ना परेशान मत होइएगा, right? The inguinal ligament has got three sort of the extensions. Number one, कौन सी है जी? Lacunar ligament. Number two, pectineal ligament, and number three, that is the reflected part of the inguinal ligament. Is it clear जी? कोई problem? Okay. Conjoint tendon तो हम लोग पढ़ चुके हैं ना, कोई problem तो नहीं है इसमें. How it is formed by the, how the conjoint tendon is formed by the lowest aponeurotic sheath, lowest aponeurotic curved fibers of the internal oblique with the transversus abdominis muscle. ठीक है जी? And it is attached where? It is attached to the pubic crest and to the pecten pubis, right? And medially, it is going to be continuous with the anterior wall of the rectus sheath, right? और laterally क्या था जी? ये बताएगा जी? Medially तो ये देखना, ये आके ये rectus sheath के anterior wall में मिल रहे हैं ना? तो laterally क्या था? It is going to form the free यार बेटा, laterally you can see ये curved fibers आ रहे हैं, तो इसका ये laterally is got the free margin. ठीक है? Clear जी? कोई problem? Okay, now we'll talk about the inguinal canal जी. Now what is the inguinal canal? Inguinal canal, you can see, it is an oblique intermuscular passage in the lower part of the anterior abdominal wall, above the medial end of the inguinal ligament. So how are we going to define the inguinal canal? It is an oblique passage. ठीक है? ये oblique passage है, right? That is present in the lower part of the anterior abdominal wall. Anterior abdominal wall के lower part में, right? So it is an oblique intermuscular passage located in the lower part of the anterior abdominal wall, just above the medial end of the inguinal ligament. The medial end of inguinal ligament. So just above the medial end of the inguinal ligament is a passage. ठीक है जी? And its length is about 4 centimeters, about 1.5 inches. ठीक है? And it is directions की क्या जी? It is directed downwards, forwards, and medially. Right? This is an oblique passage in the lower part of anterior abdominal wall, just above the medial end of the inguinal ligament, right? And it is directed downwards, forwards, and medially. इसकी extension क्या है जी? It extends from the deep inguinal ring to the superficial inguinal ring. ठीक है? ये deep inguinal ring से लेके और superficial इंग्वाइनल रिंग तक एक्सटेंड करती है जी, ठीक है। इसके कंटेंट्स क्या क्या होंगे जी? कंटेंट्स में आई हैव टोल्ड यू, कंटेंट्स में द मेल्स इट इज हैविंग दिस वन, दिस इज द जी spermatic cord, and in the case of female the round ligament of the uterus. Okay, other than these two structures one nerve passes from here and that is the Iinguinal nerve. ठीक है, it will pass through this, you know. प्रॉब्लम तो नहीं है बच्चे? Fine जी. So inguinal canal, I'm going to repeat it again. Inguinal canal is, it is an oblique intermuscular passage in the lower part of the anterior abdominal wall, at the medial, located at the medial end, just above the medial end of the inguinal ligament, right? And it is about 4 centimeters in length, or that is about 1.5 inches. Its direction is directed downwards, forwards, and medially, and it extends from the deep inguinal ring to the superficial inguinal ring, right? So it contains में spermatic cord in the males, and the females में we have got the round ligament of uterus, and then we have got the another nerve passes through this canal, and that's the Iinguinal nerve. The problem तो नहीं है ये, and in this is larger in the males than in the females. Okay, now I have used the term the deep inguinal ring. ठीक है? So what is deep inguinal ring basically? But a deep inguinal ring is basically an oval opening here. It is in an oval opening over here, right, in the fascia transversalis. ठीक है, ये ओवल ओपनिंग जो है ये ट्रांसवर्सस एब्डोमिनस में क्यों नहीं है जी? एपिनिरोसिस ऑफ ट्रांसवर्सस एब्डोमिनस में क्यों नहीं है जी? कौन बताएगा? आवाज आ रही है बेटा आप लोगों को मेरी? कैन यू हेयर मी?
यस सर।
हाँ जी, तो ये क्या, ये ट्रांसवर्सस एब्डोमिनस में क्यों नहीं है? बिकॉज मैंने बताया था ना बेटे, ट्रांसवर्सस एब्डोमिनस it passes anteriorly to these abdominis muscle, forming the anterior wall rectus sheath below the anterior superior ligament. ठीक है जी, तो इसके पीछे क्या पड़ा हुआ है? fascia transversalis ही पड़ा ना, तो ओपनिंग कहाँ होगी? fascia transversalis में होगी ना बेटा, right? So it's an oval opening in the fascia transversalis, and it is about, इसकी लोकेशन क्या है? About 0.5 inch above the mid inguinal point, right? Mid inguinal point क्या होता है? If we draw line between the anterior superior ligament to the pubic tubercle, right? So that this is a mid inguinal point. So it is about 0.5 inch above the mid inguinal point, right? And medially, I'll show you here. Stuck. But here you can see medially it is related with these vessels. These are the inferior epigastric vessels. ठीक है जी, medially it is related with the inferior epigastric vessels. Here you can see this. Now this is in a oval opening, deep inguinal, ठीक है, deep inguinal ring over here, this one here, यहाँ से you can see the spermatic cord, it is coming out basically from the inside of the pelvic cavity, right? So here you can see it is an oval opening in the fascia transversalis. यहाँ पे ये आपको fascia transversalis में नजर आ रहा है, right? तो fascia transversalis में ये oval opening है जहाँ से आपका ये spermatic cord is coming out, right? And this opening it is mediated with these vessels. ठीक है, ये इसके मिडिल क्या पड़ा हुआ है? The inferior epigastric vessel. And inferior epigastric vessel किसकी ब्रांच थी जी? किसी को याद है जी? Inferior epigastric vessel is a branch of external iliac vessels. Okay. And you see the margins of this ring, they are going to give attachment to the internal spermatic fascia. ठीक है, I told you ना कि जो जैसे ही आपका ये spermatic cord है, it will pass through the opening through the superficial inguinal ring, तो यहाँ से it is just going to carry a fascia, that is external spermatic fascia. फिर जब इंटरनल oblique से पास करेगी तो it is carrying the cremasteric fascia, the cremasteric muscle fibers, right? And when the internal spermatic fascia around this spermatic cord, these are basically 3 layers around the spermatic cord, right? So that internal spermatic fascia, it is derived from where? From the fascia transversalis. Okay, I just show somewhere else also. If I have that one, I just show you कि कैसे वो now here you can see this is the region of the deep inguinal ring, ठीक है ना? और ये देखिए ये आपका fascia transversalis आ रहा है, right? और ये आपकी spermatic cord which is leaving the cavity and coming out through this opening in the fascia transversalis, and you see ये fascia transversalis है, it is carrying a layer around it, and this layer is the internal spermatic fascia. ठीक है जी? Is it clear? You have an idea now? ठीक है ना बच्चे?
Yes.
Okay, or here you can see I told you that the Iinguinal nerve is running in this Inguinal canal. ये देखिए ये Iinguinal nerve जो है it is entering into the Inguinal canal. ठीक है जी? Between these 2 layers of the 2 muscles. Is it clear जी? कोई problem तो नहीं है? Deep inguinal ring, it is an oval opening in the fascia transversalis, which is located about 0.5 inch above the mid-inguinal point. ठीक है जी? This is the mid-inguinal point, 0.5 inch above it, right? Right? And it is medially related to the, this inferior epigastric vessels. ठीक है जी? Inferior epigastric vessels से ये सब चीज medially related है, right? And its margins are giving attachment to the internal spermatic fascia. कोई problem तो नहीं है? Okay. Now, बच्चे the now here you can see कि ये आपकी deep inguinal ring है and this is the superficial inguinal ring, and you see this is an oblique passage over here. ठीक है? जहाँ से आपका ये spermatic cord कर रही है, right? Normally what happens, you see that it is an oblique passage and it is about quite far away from the superficial inguinal ring. Well, in the newborn, this ring, it is deep inguinal ring is directly present against the superficial inguinal ring, but with the passage of time, as a result of the growth, this inguinal canal it lengthens, right, and it is going to form this oblique passage. ठीक है ना? Otherwise ये दोनों openings they are just in front of each other, and during the growth this opening it will move more medially and is going to form this oblique passage. This is how this the length of the canal increases, ठीक है, with the growth of course with the growth. ठीक है जी? कोई problem तो नहीं है? Okay, we have got another opening, and this opening is the superficial inguinal ring. I told you this is a triangular defect. ठीक है जी? ये triangular defect है. It's a triangular opening basically present where in the external oblique aponeurosis. ये external oblique aponeurosis है, right? ये external oblique aponeurosis में आपको ये triangular defect और opening नजर आ रही है, right? And it is located where? Just above and medial to the pubic tubercle. Pubic tubercle is just above and medial to the pubic tubercle. ठीक है जी? Above and you see above and medial to the pubic tubercle. Problem तो नहीं है बच्चे? Okay. And this opening is about 2.5 centimeters long. ठीक है जी? 2.5 centimeters long है और about 1.2 centimeter broad है, right? And इसकी जो base है ना, it is formed by the pubic crest. ठीक है जी? इसकी जो base है that is basically formed by the pubic crest. ये है, right जी? Okay. Now I told you that it has got the two margins. Two margins कौन से हैं जी? It has got the lower lateral margin or the lateral crest and the upper medial margin or the medial crest. ठीक है? And these two crura, if we call them together, these are the two crura, right? The lateral crest and the medial crest. The two crura, these are united at the apex by these fibers. ठीक है जी? These fibers. क्या है जी? By these intercrural fibers, right? So I'm going to repeat it again. The superficial inguinal ring, it is a triangular sort of the opening in the external umbilical aponeurosis. Okay, its length is about 2.5 centimeters, and you know space it is going to be attached at the pubic crest over here. Okay, ji, pubic crest पे attached है, and then it is having the two crura, the lateral crura and the medial crura, and these crura at their apex they are going to meet with each other by these intercrural fibers. Problem तो नहीं है जी. And when this spermatic cord will pass through this opening, then it will be carrying a fascia around it from the margins of this opening, and this fascia is called as the external spermatic fascia. Is it clear, बच्चे? Problem तो नहीं है जी. Okay. Now, have a look at this inguinal canal. This inguinal canal has got the anterior wall and the posterior wall. ठीक है जी. So anterior wall, it is contributed by the anterior wall, right? So its anterior wall, it is contributed by the external oblique aponeurosis and the fleshy fibers of the internal oblique muscle and the transversus abdominis muscle. ठीक है जी. Anterior wall जो है, it is formed by the aponeurosis and these fleshy fibers of the internal oblique and the transversus abdominis muscle. ठीक है? Is it clear? So you can see the anterior wall is strongest against this posterior wall. Posterior wall इसकी कैसे कौन बना रहा है? ये fascia transversalis बना रहा है. ठीक है ना? तो ये anterior wall इसकी strongest है than the fascia transversalis. Why? Because of fascia transversalis having the gap, the opening, the deep inguinal ring over here. Is it clear? The anterior wall of inguinal canal, it is contributed by the external oblique aponeurosis and the fleshy fibers of the internal oblique and the fleshy fibers of the transversus abdominal muscle. Whereas the posterior wall, it is weaker because it is formed by the fascia transversalis and it is having this opening, this gap in it. So posterior wall जो है, जो आपकी anterior wall है, it is strongest against the weakest point of the posterior wall. Is it clear जी? जी आवाज आ रही है बच्चे?
Yes.
Yes, what?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, clear.
So we have got the posterior. Now we'll talk about the posterior wall. Okay. Now posterior wall, it is formed medially. Literally, तो आपको ये नजर आ रही है, it is formed by the fascia transversalis. ठीक है? Posterior wall, it is literally formed by the fascia transversalis. Whereas medially it is show you. Just wait, just hold on. Okay, here you can see the posterior wall, laterally it is formed by the fascia transversalis and medially it is formed by this conjoint tendon and the reflected part of the inguinal ligament, right? So these two structures in the medial aspect of the posterior wall, it is going to make the posterior wall more strong, okay? More powerful, more strong, because against the defect in the anterior wall. Anterior wall maybe have got defect medially. That is the superficial inguinal ring. So the posterior wall, which is formed by medially by the conjoint tendon and reflected part of the inguinal ligament, it is basically doing what? It is giving the strength to the inguinal canals against this weakest anterior part, anterior wall over here. Okay, where this, of the external oblique appearance, क्योंकि इसमें यहाँ पे opening है जी. Is it clear जी? So posterior wall is strongest than the anterior wall, where there is no opening for the superficial inguinal. ठीक है जी? Is it clear जी? Okay. Now, how the roof of the inguinal canal is formed जी? The roof of the inguinal canal is formed by the arching fibers of the internal oblique and the transversus abdominis muscle. ठीक है, ये transversus abdominis और internal oblique के जो arching fibers हैं aponeurosis के, these are going to form the superior wall of the roof of the inguinal canal. And how it is floor is going to form? I told you the floor is formed by the grooved upper surface of the medial part of the inguinal ligament. ठीक है जी, and also it's contributed by the medial end of the lacunar ligament. ठीक है जी, so floor is contributed by the grooved upper surface of the medial part of the inguinal ligament and the lacunar ligament. ठीक है जी, और function क्या होगा जी inguinal canal का? Inguinal canal is formed by the, sorry, it is function that it is forming a passage for the spermatic cord in male and the round ligament in the female. ठीक है जी, okay जी, if we have finished with over here, we'll talk about the mechanism of inguinal canal and hernias in the, probably tomorrow I will take a class of 30 minutes or 40, right? We will discuss at that time. ठीक है जी.